Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is anti-war news for Tuesday, March 5th, 2024. All right, the first story at the top of antiwar.com today. British soldiers are in Ukraine helping fire Storm Shadow missiles. So British soldiers are on the ground in Ukraine helping Ukrainian forces fire Storm Shadow missiles. And this is according to a leaked recording of a conversation between German military officers that was published by Russian media. And Germany confirmed the authenticity of this recording, and the British did not dispute this claim. The UK actually confirmed last week that it had a small number of troops inside Ukraine who they said were supporting the armed forces of Ukraine. So recently there's been all this talk about NATO troops, the potential of sending NATO troops to Ukraine, which put a lot of attention on the fact that there are already at least a small number of NATO special operations forces in Ukraine, and now this is more evidence of that, and it really goes to show how involved NATO is in this war. So these Storm Shadow missiles, the UK first started sending them to Ukraine last year, and it was a big deal. It was a big escalation because they have a range of 155 miles, which was further than any other NATO-provided missile. And I know that they've used these to hit targets deep inside Crimea and things like that. And France has also provided Ukraine with a French variant of the Storm Shadow known as the Scalp missile. But according to these German military officers, France does not have troops actually. Well, according to some of the leaks, France does have special operations troops in Ukraine, but these German officers said France did not have troops helping with the firing these missiles on the ground. So in this recording, it was the head of the German Air Force who described how the British assist Ukraine. He said, quote, "When it comes to mission planning, I know how the English do it. They do it completely in reach back. They also have a few people on the ground. They do that. The French don't," end quote. So they were discussing as well the possibility of Germany providing Ukraine with Taurus missiles, which would double Ukraine's strike capabilities because they can hit targets up to 300 miles away. So that would be a huge escalation. In this conversation, again, this leaked conversation of German military officers that's been confirmed to be real by the Germans, these officers say that Taurus missiles could likely be used to blow up the Kerch Bridge, which connects Crimea to the Russian mainland and has been attacked twice by Ukraine. The Kremlin said that the leaked conversation, quote, "makes it clear that plans to carry out strikes inside Russia are under discussion within the German military," end quote. So we know that the British have helped Ukraine plot attacks against the Crimean Bridge. And according to one of the reports about the CIA involvement in Ukraine that's come out in the past few months, I believe it was the Washington Post one, said that the second Ukrainian attack on the Crimean Bridge was carried out using a drone, a sea drone that was designed with the help of the CIA. So, again, it shows how directly involved NATO is in targeting Russia. And that has all sorts of implications for the risk of escalation. It's clear that the Russians don't want to fight a direct war with NATO, because if they wanted to, they have all the pretext in the world for launching an attack against a NATO base. And so a lot has been going on with all this talk of NATO involvement in Ukraine. And I missed this last week. I didn't see this. I saw Dan McAdams talking about this, who was he's the co-host of the Liberty Report with Ron Paul. So last week, Olaf Scholz, the German chancellor, he actually basically said that there were British troops on the ground in Ukraine, and he made the comments while explaining his reasoning for not supplying Ukraine with the Taurus missiles. So he's still saying that they're not going to give them those longer-range missiles. But when he said that, he said it would require a German troop presence on the ground like the UK has, and he also said like the French has, but then this other recording says the French aren't doing that. But anyway, he basically said that the British have this presence on the ground. And he also said that providing that kind of support would make Germany a direct party to the conflict, since the Taurus missiles have such a long range and can be used to hit targets deep inside Russia. And of course, this leaked recording comes out after Macron, the French president, stirred up all this controversy by saying that sending NATO troops to Ukraine should not be ruled out, despite the obvious risk of a direct Russia-NATO war, which could quickly turn nuclear. His comments highlighted the fact that the presence of NATO Special Operations Forces inside Ukraine has been an open secret. So according to that Discord leak from last year that I'm always citing, that was in March 2023, and it said that 97 Special Operations soldiers were inside Ukraine, including 14 Americans, 50 British soldiers, 15 French troops, 17 soldiers from Latvia, and it said one guy from Netherlands as well, one Dutch soldier. So just all this talk about this, I mean, it seems while we're so focused on what's happening in Gaza, there's just all these escalations or kind of revelations when it comes to NATO involvement in the Ukrainian proxy war against Russia. All right, so the next one here, NATO conducts large-scale war games across Nordic states. This article is from Kyle Anzalone at the Libertarian Institute. And it says that NATO's Nordic members, Finland, Sweden, and Norway, are hosting massive war games across the three nations. And Finland and Sweden, of course, are the newest members of the alliance and will each contribute over 4,000 soldiers to the drills. So they have drilled with NATO in recent years, even when they weren't in NATO. But now this is a big drill. Over 20,000 NATO troops from 13 countries will participate. It's going to be held from March 4th to the 15th. 50 naval vessels will be involved and over 100 aircraft. So this is a big drill. And this is going to become more common as these countries are now officially NATO members, and the U.S. is establishing a military presence in both countries. So we'll definitely see more of things like this up there in the Nordic countries, that the ones that just joined, Sweden and Finland. All right. Excuse me, sorry. The next one here, child deaths in Gaza will increase rapidly. So at least 16 Palestinian children have starved to death in the Gaza Strip over the past few days due to the U.S.-backed Israeli siege. And the UN's Child Relief Agency is warning that the number of child deaths will rapidly increase if conditions don't immediately change. So this is the director of UNICEF for the Middle East and North Africa. She said, quote, "Last week we warned that an explosion in child deaths was imminent if the burgeoning nutrition crisis was not resolved. Now the child deaths we feared are here and are likely to rapidly increase unless the war ends and obstacles to humanitarian relief are immediately resolved," end quote. So the latest Palestinian child reported to die of hunger was a boy named Yazan al-Kafarna. He was only 10 years old, and he had cerebral palsy, and he died in the Al-Najjar hospital in Rafah. And the picture of him, I believe this picture was taken the day before he died, is really horrific. And so this is in southern Gaza. The situation is much worse in northern Gaza, but it's still very dire in the south. And he had cerebral palsy, and he required certain supplements because some people with cerebral palsy have real trouble eating. And this says, you know, he didn't have access to the nutrition that he needed and the supplements that he needed, and so he died of malnutrition and dehydration. And 15 children have also died of malnutrition at the Kamal Adwan Hospital in northern Gaza. And these are just the deaths that have been recorded at the hospitals. So it's just a really horrific situation. And the U.S. reaffirmed on Monday, the State Department specifically reaffirmed that it will continue to provide military assistance for Israel's genocidal war in Gaza. The U.S. is still not pushing for an immediate ceasefire or using military aid as leverage over Israel to allow more aid trucks in. Instead, they're starting to do these airdrops that they did over the weekend, which the aid groups have criticized as a public relations ploy. Still full-throated support for Israel, even as we know children are starving to death. Innocent little children, most of them are infants, are starving to death, and yet, I mean, they're just full support. Doesn't matter. They're claiming that they're working on this hostage deal, that a ceasefire is going to happen soon, but that's only temporary. I mean, after 6 weeks is not going to be enough time to help all these people. And, they're just, still, I don't really know what to say. I mean, there's a lot to say about it, but sometimes it leaves you speechless. But the death toll, according to Gaza's health ministry on Monday, is 30,534 Palestinians, and 71,920 have been injured. About 70% of the casualties are women and children. All right, so the next one here, a UN report says that Palestinians were sexually abused and beaten in Israeli detention. So this is another article from Kyle, and a document compiled by the UN Palestinian Agency, UNRWA, found rampant abuse of Palestinians in Israeli detention facilities. The detainees report frequent beatings, sexual abuse, and even the deaths of prisoners. Thousands of Palestinians have been rounded up by the IDF in Gaza over the past 4 months. So the New York Times viewed an UNRWA report that documents all this abuse. It says, quote, detainees said they were beaten, stripped, robbed, blindfolded, sexually abused, and denied access to lawyers and doctors, often for more than a month. Some detainees, according to the report, told UNRWA investigators that they had often been beaten on open wounds, had been held for hours in painful stress positions, and had been attacked by military dogs, end quote. One prisoner was beaten so badly that his genitals turned blue and there was still blood present in his urine. So really horrific accounts here of the treatment in the Israeli prisons. All right, so the next one here, Kibbutz Berry rejects the story in the New York Times about the October 7th, the allegations of systematic sexual assault committed by Hamas. So this is an article from The Intercept from Jeremy Scahill and Ryan Grimm. And it says that 2 of the 3 victims specifically singled out by the New York Times in a expose published in December, which alleged that Hamas had deliberately weaponized sexual violence during the October 7th attacks, were not, in fact, victims of sexual assault, according to the spokesperson for the Kibbutz Berry, which the Times identified as the location of the attack. So the rejection of the Times reporting in the Kibbutz Berry by the spokesperson further undermines the credibility of the paper's controversial article. And the Intercept recently reported on how the New York Times, one of the authors, I forget her name, but she's a former Israeli intel official, Israeli filmmaker who wasn't a journalist, and she was basically coerced. According to her, she didn't really want to do the story initially, to do the story and basically, go find us a story here, spin us a narrative. And now this spokesperson for this kibbutz, where, again, 2 of the victims who were sisters, aged 13 and 16, they were killed, which is bad enough. But this guy is saying no, they were just shot and that they were not subjected to sexual abuse. And again, this is a spokesman for the kibbutz, where they were killed during the Hamas attack. And this is the same kibbutz where Israeli tanks shelled a house, killing Hamas guys that were in there, as well as most of the Israeli hostages. Only one survived that was in the house. All right, so the next one here, Israel kills 3 rescue workers in South Lebanon. So this is one from Jason Ditz, and it says 3 rescue workers were killed today he wrote this on Monday, in the southern Lebanese border town of Ad-Daiseh. I definitely pronounced that wrong. I apologize. I should have checked before I recorded. But they were targeted by an Israeli airstrike. The 3 were with the rescue force Al-Haya, which is affiliated with Hezbollah. Israel did not comment on the deaths, but earlier in the day reported attacking several buildings in southern Lebanon. They also said they were shelling launch sites that were the source of fire into northern Israel. The Lebanese government confirmed the deaths of the rescue workers, saying that it brought the total number of emergency workers and paramedics killed to 7 since the beginning of Israeli attacks in the area 5 months ago. On the Israeli side of the border, an anti-tank missile was reported to have hit an orchard, killing a foreign worker and wounding 7 others, 2 of them seriously. The orchard was near the border village of Margaliat. So escalations continue across the border there. And then the next one, a U.S. envoy says that a truce in Gaza will not necessarily extend to Lebanon. So U.S. Special Envoy Amos Hochstein said on Monday that a truce in Gaza will not necessarily extend to Lebanon as Israel and Hezbollah continue to trade fire across the border. So Hochstein said, quote, "It does not necessarily happen that when you have a ceasefire in Gaza, it just automatically extends," end quote. Sources close to Hezbollah have said that they would likely halt attacks on Israel if there was a ceasefire in Gaza. And as I've mentioned quite a bit, you have Israel threatening that they're going to escalate in Lebanon if there is a ceasefire, a temporary ceasefire in Gaza as a result of a potential hostage deal. So Hochstein is the U.S. official. He's actually like a special advisor to Biden for energy, and he brokered some kind of deal between Israel and Lebanon when it comes to offshore natural gas. And he's been tasked with brokering this deal between Israel and Hezbollah. I have to mention, it's interesting that Hochstein was actually born in Israel and he served in the IDF. Someone with that background being tasked with brokering a deal between Israel and another country. Doesn't it just seem like a conflict of interest? So anyway, and another thing is that the U.S. doesn't talk directly with Hezbollah. They talk to the Lebanese government in Beirut. And Hezbollah is, part of the government in the parliament, but, he's speaking with the prime minister. I believe he spoke with a leader in the parliament as well. And he was warning against escalations on the Israel-Lebanon border. He said the only solution to this is a diplomatic deal. But so far, it doesn't seem like Lebanon, and not just Hezbollah, but Lebanon, is not happy with the proposals that the U.S. and France has also put forward some stuff, because all it is basically Hezbollah withdrawing from the border and no concessions from Israel. So we'll see how this all plays out. And as I covered recently, U.S. officials have told CNN that they expect Israel to launch an invasion of southern Lebanon if there is no diplomatic deal. And that report said that Israel would not be happy with just Hezbollah moving back from the border. They want something more than that. So that sounds like it sounds like they're pretty far apart on what they want for a deal. And Hezbollah has basically said as well that they would only discuss something if there was a ceasefire in Gaza. All right, so the next one here, this is good news. The Idaho State Senate passes the Defend the Guard Act. So on Monday, Idaho State Senate passed the Defend the Guard Act, legislation that would prohibit the deployment of the state's National Guard to a combat zone without a declaration of war from Congress, as required by the Constitution. The bill was introduced in January by Senator Ben Adams and passed in a vote of 27-8, which is pretty good. 27-8, that's not bad. Now it heads to the state's House of Representatives for consideration. I think there's some confidence that it will do well in the House, which is great. So Idaho's Senate is the third state legislature to approve the Defend the Guard Act. This follows New Hampshire and Arizona. So those are two states where it could potentially become law. So far, no state has made it law yet, but this Defend the Guard Act, this is a relatively young project, and they're making a lot of big strides here. And so the Defend the Guard Act, I've been discussing this a lot lately because I think this is something, when it comes to really hurting the federal government's ability to wage war, to wage these, continuous wars in the Middle East and Africa. This is a way to really rein in that war making, and it's a way, it's kind of decentralization, and it's states taking away the power from the federal government, which is great. So you could go to defendtheguard.us to see if the act has been introduced in your state. They have a nice, useful map for you. It's been introduced in over 30 states. So, they're making, again, they're very active on this, and you can sign up to phone bank with them to volunteer. And that's really, I'm telling you, if you really want to spend some of your time really trying to make a difference when it comes to this war stuff that we're always talking about, this is something really that has a lot of potential that I think people would be, feel like you're really doing something good with your time. So definitely, and if you do sign up, please let me know, because they told me if I could just get 1 or 2 or 3 people to help them with the phone banking, that would make a big difference, a huge difference. They do a lot with few people. So please let me know, because I'd be happy to know if I'm helping them out by trying to pitch this. So yeah, this is good news. I'm probably going to leave this up for a few days because we got to have some positive news here. And, just want to encourage people again to help out. Just be aware of this. And, if you live in a state where it hasn't been introduced, you could talk to, if you know any of your state, if you have a relationship with any state representatives or senators, or you could try reaching out to them to discuss this with them. It's something even just planting the seed, the idea, letting them know about this. All right, so the next one here, Jack Teixeira pleads guilty for leaking Pentagon documents. So if you remember Jack Teixeira, he was the young man who was arrested for the Discord leaks. On Monday, he was a member of the Air National Guard, and on Monday he pleaded guilty for leaking the documents to Discord that surfaced in the media last year. And these documents revealed U.S. government lies about the Ukraine proxy war. So with his guilty plea, Teixeira agreed to a deal that will see him serve a harsh sentence of between 11 and 16 years in prison. The final sentence will be decided by a federal judge in September. So that's a long time in prison. Apparently, if he didn't go for the deal, they were threatening to lock him up for 60 years. So, I mean, he didn't really have much of a choice. But after the guilty plea, Teixeira's family issued a statement that said that he had taken responsibility for his part in the leaks. And they also pointed to an investigation by the Air Force Inspector General of the 102nd Intelligence Wing where Teixeira worked. And so this investigation by the Inspector General found a lackadaisical work atmosphere, a lack of adequate training and oversight, combined with a complete disregard for policy or procedure. And the IG found that this directly and indirectly contributed to what happened, contributed to Teixeira being able to leak these documents. And after this investigation, the commanding officer of this intelligence wing was removed, and 14 other officers were disciplined. And Teixeira, I feel for this kid because he's 22 now. He started leaking these documents, I think in 2022, where he was sharing a lot of stuff on this Discord server. And these were like his online buddies that he became friends with during the COVID lockdowns. And he was like a senior in high school during COVID. Like, I can't imagine being that young and not having a senior year in high school or being college age and not being able to go out. I mean, I just, like I said, I have a lot of sympathy for him. And what he leaked, he didn't do it in the traditional, whistleblower way, but what he leaked was for the public good. The knowledge that we received from the documents, and some of the biggest revelations from the Discord leaks was the fact that the U.S. did not think Ukraine could succeed in the counteroffensive. This was before Ukraine launched the counteroffensive, and it turned out there was all sorts of media reports that came out confirming that the U.S. never thought they really stood a chance to gain any territory, but they pushed forward anyway to continue the war. It doesn't matter how many Ukrainians or Russians die. Of course, they want to kill Russians, and they don't care how many Ukrainians die. And there was also the revelation of the confirmation of NATO special operations troops. That's important. That's a really important one, because we could go back to that and say, look, concrete evidence that NATO has boots on the ground. Maybe a small presence, but they're there. And then there was also the spying. It revealed that the U.S. was spying on the UN Secretary General. It revealed that the U.S. was spying on, I believe, South Korea, Ukraine, Hungary, all these U.S. allies. So very embarrassing for the U.S. government. If you remember, the White House warned media outlets, don't report on these leaks. They didn't want people getting their hands on them. So, like I said, I think a lot of good came out of these leaks. And there was apparently 300 documents, but the mainstream media outlets that obtained them buried them, basically worked with the U.S. government to hide them from the public. And they also identified the leaker before the federal government did. The New York Times, along with Bellingcat, put out Teixeira's name before the government did. And of course, he's just not going to have anybody sticking up for him because, again, the way he did it, it's not in the traditional way that a whistleblower would do it. It's just sharing it with his friends, and it got out. All right, so the next one here, U.S. deploys anti-drone laser systems to the Middle East. This one is from Kyle at the Libertarian Institute. The Defense Department has deployed 4 laser systems designed to intercept drones and rockets in the Middle East. The Pentagon has been developing a laser-style interceptor to reduce the cost of shooting down UAVs and rockets. I know shooting down the Houthi drones and missiles has cost the U.S. a ton of money, millions and millions of dollars. So now they deployed these laser systems, and they're going to be testing them in the Middle East. And Raytheon, which is the former employer of the Secretary of Defense, has received over $100 million contract to develop this platform. And I know recently, maybe it was a few years ago at this point, but a U.S. destroyer tested a laser. This is on a vehicle, so for land use, but a U.S. Navy destroyer tested a laser weapon in the Red Sea off the coast of Yemen a few years ago. It was just a crazy picture of a U.S. Navy warship firing a big laser beam. So this is something that they're trying to develop, and I know Israel's trying to develop their Iron Beam, which is like a laser air defense system. All right, so the last one here, a secret cable reveals that the CIA orchestrated Haiti's 2004 coup. So this article is from The Gray Zone from Jeb Sprague and Kit Clarenberg. This seems like a pretty big deal. A classified diplomatic cable that was obtained by The Gray Zone reveals the role of a veteran CIA officer in violently overthrowing Haiti's popular president in 2004. So basically, there was a jailbreak in Haiti in August 2002 that saw a bulldozer smash through the local prison walls, allowing these armed supporters of opposition actually a gang leader in Haiti to get out. And that prison break ultimately led to the 2004 coup. And the documents released to the Gray Zone under a FOIA reveal that the jailbreak was part of a complex U.S. intelligence operation aimed at undermining Aristide's presidency, the president at the time. And at the heart of this operation was Janice L. Elmore, a CIA operative working undercover as a Department of State political officer in the U.S. Embassy in Haiti at the time. So there's a lot of details in this article. And this is important just because U.S. intervention in Haiti, Western intervention in Haiti, has a very dark history. And right now there's a lot happening in Haiti. I've been meaning to kind of cover it. There is a there's a jailbreak, another one. But this time the jailbreak, there's a lot going on, and I don't want to say too much because I don't understand the situation totally. I know that there's gangs in Haiti, but there's also kind of armed groups that are rising up to overthrow the government, which is not popular, of Ariel Henry, the current leader, who is backed by the U.S. That's why the U.S. wants an intervention force led by Kenya to go into Haiti, because in this case they want to protect the government. And there's just been fighting, and when Henry, the Haitian leader, just went to Kenya to try to get the intervention force, this is when they declared like an attack against the government. So there's just a lot happening right now in Haiti, and they want to send this intervention force, but of just like a few thousand police. But I don't know if that's going to really do anything against the groups on the ground. All right, so that's it for the news for today. Please go check out our Viewpoints, one from Ted Snyder, the stories you're not hearing about the Russian-Ukraine war. One from Juan Cole, is Tehran winning the Middle East? One from Elias Khoury, what's missing from the debate over U.S. troops in Syria? One from James Robbins, the Israeli settler movement's ugly post-war plans for Gaza. And one from Doug Bandow, Ukraine propagandists demand go all in on the war. So that is it for me for today. Please, you could always support us by sharing this show. Tell your friends about antiwar.com. Follow us on Instagram. There's a lot happening over there. Twitter, all that stuff helps out. I think my voice was much better today. Still a little rough, but I'm pretty much all better. But anyway, I'll be back tomorrow with some more news for you. Thanks for listening.